Okay. Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you to Dr. Kell for inviting me today. My name's Greg. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can email me if you have questions after this. I'm very friendly, although I'm probably a little bit nervous to be talking to all of you, so don't hold that against me. Okay, so a little bit about me. Scott covered some of this, so I'm going to go quickly through it. Yes, I work at TaxSlayer. I lead the design team. I actually moved here from Chicago about 4 years ago. And interesting to me anyway, I grew up in a small river town in southern Indiana, so moving to Augusta was kind of like coming home in some ways. As Scott mentioned, I attended Butler University, which another fortuitous thing is that Butler's mascot is the Bulldogs. So when all you Georgia fans are like, go Dogs, I can say, yeah, go Dogs, and I'm actually cheering for my team, but you guys don't know it. So I have a master's degree in human-computer interaction. Does anyone in here, show of hands, does anyone know what that is? Okay, yes, okay, 2. Great. So human-computer interaction basically means I'm kind of a nerd for how people use technology. Okay, so how they actually type, speak, talk, all that stuff, I geek out on it. It's also annoying because I'm watching people use their Apple devices in the front and like thinking of things I could ask you, as well as I want to pet your dog. Okay, but the biggest part of my life, and I always share these folks, is my family, right? Because we work really hard, but we work hard for our family. So that's my wife, Kim, my 2 children, Charlotte and Isaac, our adorable cat, Murray. He's got the bluest eyes ever, and he runs the house, including bossing around our yellow lab, Butler, and our chocolate lab pit mix, Guster. So it's quite funny to see a 6-pound white cat chase an 80-pound lab pit mix around the house. That's what happens. Some fun facts, because I like to make sure that everybody knows me, so you have something you can come up and talk to me about afterwards. I'm a big soccer fan. I attended the World Cup in Germany in 2006, and this picture was actually taken in the stadium in Kaiserslautern when the U.S. was about to play Italy. So, and then another fun fact, sorry for the resolution, but this is me right here. I used to promote concerts for a living. I actually am a career changer. So I did marketing and promotions for about 7 years. And then I switched gears and thought this internet thing was not going to be a fad that would go away. I should get in on it. So as part of promoting concerts, one of my, I guess, more fun stories is I actually spent a day with Slash, driving him all over Indianapolis. There's a whole lot more that we could go into, but we're not going to do that in this presentation. Slash, guy from Guns N' Roses, if any of you are not sure. So he's a character. Scott mentioned some of my work. So I spent about 7.5 years at Walgreens. So that's where the biggest part of my portfolio is from. I spent a lot of time on mobile native apps, point of sale. We rolled out Apple Pay. I did a lot of research in the pharmacies, working with pharmacists to understand what problems they had and how we could make it better for them. Did some work just on the main website. And then right before I left Walgreens, my team actually rolled out a closed ecosystem of Walgreens-owned devices. So these are Zebra devices that we would give to the employees that they could use while they were actually performing functions in the store for their jobs. Make sense? If I say something and it's really confusing, like don't be afraid to like put your hand up and be like, wait, I don't get that. So be bold, okay? Okay. I also worked at Motorola. So if anybody's familiar with the operating system versions of Android, I was working on Eclair. I see you nodding your head. So I worked on the 5th version of Android, Eclair. They're up to, I think, Tiramisu now. So gives you a little bit of an idea that I go back a ways. I actually worked on the first fitness device that they rolled out, and I spent a lot of time working on the Droid Shadow. It had another name when it went to market. I think it was the Edge. But it was marketed as the Apple iPhone killer, right? And we all know how much it killed the iPhone, because where's Motorola now? And so some of the apps that I focused a lot of time on were audio-related apps. So the podcast app and the radio app, they actually had a feature on there where you could get FM radio over your Android phone. They had the antennas built into there. It was kind of handy, I thought. Of course, I worked on other things, but we're going to go on in the interest of time. Some other interesting things that I've worked on, back in, it would have been 1999, I was working for a small company and we designed a PlayStation controller. And what this did was each of these pods came out and you held them in your hand, and you could tilt them in any direction you wanted and use it to control your player, right? So imagine you have one hand that controls where your player moves, and the other controls where the player looks, right? And at the time, in 1999, that was pretty cutting edge. And we actually went to the E3 convention in LA, which is the biggest gaming convention for computer games and the like that there is. If you ever get the chance to go, it's amazing. Like what EA sets up and Nintendo and all those people, they like have these monstrous setups. It's pretty cool. And then I also have designed my own iPad case. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit, so I don't want to dwell on it right now. I also hold a patent for, we developed this idea that we could use the infrared sensor on the front of your mobile phone to detect the color of red light emitted from the point of sale, and then have the mobile app respond and do something different, right? So the idea would be that if the person went to the cash register to pay in Walgreens and they scanned their loyalty card, we would sense that and we would say thank you and give them a coupon that they could also scan, right? Give them a little reward, make them feel good, and also give them a reason to come back into their phone. Water, because I'm drying out already. Okay, and then the last thing I'll say, I've done a little bit of time in the startup world. I worked for a startup called Gift, G-I-V-T. They're not around anymore, so, you know, and it's not my fault. But they were a gift card trading platform. And, you know, if you want advice on working for startups, I can give you some. If you're at the right place in life, I would generally say go for it, is my advice. So take that for what it's worth. If you have kids in a home and you're, I don't know, like me, then don't go for it because there's a lot of risk involved. And they only have so much runway and it runs out quick. Okay, then a few last kind of interesting stats. When I was at Walgreens and working on the native app, there's a refill by scan feature in the app, right, where you can use your phone to scan the barcode on your bottle to start the refill process. At one point, I don't know if this is still true because I've been gone for 4 years now, but at one point we were doing, I want to make sure I say this properly, we were doing 1 scan per minute every hour of every day, 365 days a year. Now that's average, right? There might have been a time where we didn't have one, but it averaged out to where the app was getting so much usage. So it's just, I like to share that because A, I'm proud of it, right? We were impacting a lot of people. A lot of people love it because it makes their lives easier. They don't have to go to the store to start the refill process, right? But also it gives you an idea of just magnitude and impact, that millions of people were interacting with this. I've put software on multiple continents with Motorola. Designing for multiple languages is really hard to make sure that you get it all right and that, you know, the parameters of what you stand up will work with multiple types of interfaces. Very difficult. And then lastly, working for TaxSlayer, my team enables more than 10 million tax returns every year, and we help people to get, I pressed the button, I hope it didn't do anything. Okay, we help people to get more than $15 million in refunds. So, and you might hear me say it, but I really like the good things that I get to do for people. That's what I've tried to emphasize here too, right? So, okay, so, you know, why am I here? You know, why are you here? Why is anybody here, okay? So I'm gonna talk with you about design thinking. And I'm gonna give you a brief history of design thinking. It's one slide. It's not as dry as it sounds like it could be. Come on, there you go. I'm gonna share with you my beliefs on what design thinking is. And hopefully you'll see throughout this conversation that design thinking is not something that anyone can tell you they know everything about, because no one does. And I think that Mr. Chestnut said the same thing in his talk, and I would fully agree with him. Anybody that tells you they know everything about everything isn't telling the truth. I don't want to say liar, but they're not telling you the truth, because nobody knows everything about everything, right? We're going to walk through through the general design thinking process, and process is in quotes because you're going to hear me not like the word process, and so we'll come back to that, but it's in quotes for a reason. That's not a typo. We're going to step through some examples of design thinking in action, and then we're going to save some time, hopefully for Q&A, if I don't blather on too much. Sound good? All right, head nods, thank you. Okay, So before I go any further, I already mentioned the caveat that I don't know everything. No one does. But I wanted to know by a show of hands, who in the room has ever participated in a project where you used a user-centered design methodology or design thinking? 1, 2, good, okay, great. I'm gonna ask for you guys' help when I get stuck, so there you go, be prepared. And then my last question, if anyone is brave enough, is there anything that any of you were hoping to get out of today's discussion that I can try to make sure I answer? Bravery? Anybody? Okay, it's all right. I didn't expect that there would be. It's not like I got to tell you in advance to come prepared to answer that question. So, okay? Well, great. So, a brief history of design thinking, right? The reason I wanted to share this is, it's one slide, is that this gives you an idea that the best things are iterated upon and they mature over time. And you're going to hear the word iteration more as we move through this discussion. Right? So a lot of people think, and this is where you can debate history, but a lot of people think that design thinking started with Herbert Simon and Robert McKim back in the 60s. They put out some books. I have to look at my notes because I forget all the names, like The Science of Design and Experiences in Visual Design, Visual Thinking. They kind of kicked the ball off and got some of the ideas to start percolating. In the 70s, at the very start of the 70s, Bruce Archer was working at the Royal College of Design in London, and he actually started to take the theoretical design thinking approaches that people before him had talked about, and he started to include them into his architectural practice as well as into his teaching environment. Okay, so we keep moving forward. I'm gonna skip. Well, actually, I don't want to skip Nigel Cross. So Nigel Cross, I want to make sure I get his name. The name of his book right. Nigel Cross came out with a book in the mid-'80s called Designerly Ways of Thinking. I just love the title, and I just had to make sure I gave it a little bit of credit. Designerly Ways of Thinking. Then in the mid-'80s, Peter Rowe comes along, and this is when design thinking starts to begin the process of slowly ramping up. Peter Rowe actually wrote the book, Design Thinking. He's actually credited in some circles with giving us the term design thinking. Now, I'm not a historian. I don't know everything. We could probably debate that there's someone in there that I forgot, but you get the idea. Rolf Fast then really started to expand design thinking into the curriculum of Stanford University's design school, which obviously the more people that are learning about this in colleges, the more you're going to hear about it out in the real world. Right? I'm going to skip Richard. In the mid-'90s, David Kelly and Tim Brown founded the design firm IDEO. I feel like I'm in your way. I'm sorry. I'm trying. Okay. So for those of you that don't know, IDEO is given a lot of credit for evangelizing design thinking. They were one of the leaders, one of the pioneers at going to their clients and saying, this is how we're going to do this. And if you don't like that, then you can find another firm. Right? And in doing that, they started to evangelize and talk about this notion of design thinking and user-centered design, right? Just make sure I don't forget anything. Tim Brown's book on change by design then in the 2000s was really picked up by a lot of business leaders. The name of the actual book, if you ever want to read it, was Change by Design, How Design Thinking Transforms Organizations and Inspires Innovation. This was a book that a lot of the business people started to pick up because they thought it would help them reposition their companies to be more strategic, And by that time, design was like this really hip thing. Everybody wanted a designer. I was there. People would call me for UX jobs and they didn't even know what I would do. It's really weird when you go into an interview and you explain to someone what you're going to do for them and they're like, okay, here's your job. So kind of hit the jackpot on that one. Richard Florida wrote a book called The Rise of the Creative Class. I just love some of the titles, too, of these books. There's another one that was Designerly Ways of Knowing. I just love the title. I think it's so funny I'm going to use that on my wife. And she's like, how do you know that? I'm saying, honey, I have designerly ways of knowing. It's kind of pompous, too, in some ways. But anyway, so that's a brief history of it. The key thing to take from this slide is that design thinking continues to evolve and it continues to change, and it continues to ideate. That's why I show this one slide. Any questions? Okay. All right, so design thinking. What is it? So if you Google design thinking, you'll get 1.26 billion results in half a second. That's a lot. I've not read all those. I tried over the weekend, and it didn't go so well. But the other thing you'll notice when you Google design thinking is that Google will try to start forcing upon you these images. They give you the nice image search, and this stuff really, you can see it here in the background a little bit, like it pulls your eye to it, right? Okay, so they're showing you process models that a lot of people have created to represent design thinking, right? And it's kind of fun to step through some of these real quick. So here's Stanford's. You'll see, I want to step through these quickly so you get some of the themes of design thinking. The first theme is empathize. And we're going to talk about all of these in detail, so I'm going to go quick. Empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, and assess. Okay? So the next one we'll step through. I forget what company came out with this one. It kind of makes me dizzy. But if you go left to right, you'll see you have understand, observe, point of view, ideate, prototype, test, storytelling. Storytelling I love. Pilot, business model. Okay, so they took some of the business stuff and tacked it on the end, and then they renamed a few things at the beginning to make it look like it was their own. Right? This one, the idea that the circle has no beginning, no end. Same concepts, empathy, define, ideate, prototype, test, empathy, define. You get it. This one is where somebody tried to get like fancy and sexy, and they got some of the same ideas over here, but then they say something right here that bugs me. They say select, vote for your favorites. User-centered design isn't about like your favorite or your favorite. We don't care what your favorite is. We care what's the favorite of the person using the thing. So this one immediately for me should be thrown in the trash can. And if you see it, like feel free to write a nasty letter to somebody. Okay, the two baseball diamonds bumping into each other. This is actually called the double diamond approach. This is another great model that as your career goes on, you might see this. But the general underlying themes are the same as the very first model, right? So you've got this idea that you have a challenge, and then you're going to think divergently on that challenge as you understand the problem space. Then eventually, when you've done enough research and you really understand the problem space, you're going to start to converge on a problem statement so that you can get what you're going to do down to something manageable, right? So then as you converge, here in the middle where the two diamonds bump into each other, you have a reframed problem. And then you're ready to go into the ideate phase, right? You're recognizing that I'm saying a lot of the same words in each of these over and over. They're all doing similar things in slightly different ways. Excuse me, they're all saying the same thing in slightly different ways, right? So you think divergently, you come up with lots of ideas, you create lots of prototypes, then you gradually narrow down the prototypes through testing, and eventually you have something that is a solution that solves a person's problem. Yes?
UX and design thinking are not synonymous, but UX is a part of design thinking. Right?
It's right depending on who you ask. So I personally, as a person who lives in the UX space, believe that design thinking is entirely incorporated in what we do.
Okay,
and
so UX can be synonymous with design thinking. Okay.
Right. Good question, though. Sorry, Ice Cube. Checking the time. Okay. I call this one the Camel, right? But it's, again, same ideas. Diverge, converge, inspiration, ideation, yada, yada, yada. This one is my favorite that I couldn't wait to share with you guys because, wow, it's overwhelming when I put it up there at first. So this is by a company, I think it's called Evolution 6 Squared, and I think it's a French company. Yeah, shake it off, bud. There's an awesome dog up here, sorry. So Evolution 6, or whatever their name is, they thought, let's not show it in the way that other people do. Let's make it completely different. Let's call it emergence. And then we'll call it empathy, experimentation, elaboration, exposition, extension. Oh my God, a whole bunch of new words that all really are talking about the same thing. And look at these tricky devils. They branded it. All E words for Evolution 6. Oh, somebody probably made $1 million off of that, right? Yeah, this one's pretty, right? We'll go on. This is ideos. This is we're almost done with this section. So frame a question, gather inspiration, generate ideas, make ideas tangible, make things, test and learn, share the story. Share the story. We're going to skip that one. And then this is the model that I feel is most common. This is the one that I was introduced on, and I feel like it's kind of the easiest to digest. And this is what we're going to use as we move through this discussion. But you should see things that you've already heard in the other models. Empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. And then there's arrows connecting back to things, and we'll cover why that is. Okay, but the main reason I wanted to show you those process diagrams is that design thinking is not just a process. In fact, it's not a process, okay? It's very important that you understand that. It's very important that you don't take an image that you find on the internet and you go into a job and you say, we're going to do this, and I'm a design thinker, because that would be completely false, and you're selling yourself the wrong way, okay? So it's not a process. So I'm going to take you through 3 things that represent what design thinking is for me. Now, these could be different for other people. Other people could frame this up in a different way, but I would like to think that they would all kind of ladder back to similar principles, even if they don't like to pick out these 3 things. Okay? With me so far? Yeah? Head nods? Okay, thank you. I like the feedback. Okay, so the first of the 3 is that design thinking is a mindset, right? You got to find that zen, right? You got to get your mind in the right place so that you can be empathetic and caring about other people's problems. It's a mindset that allows us to solve problems through focusing on the needs of people. That is drastically different than how we solve a lot of other problems in the world, right? Like in the business world, if we don't sell enough of something, then we find a way to sell more. We find a way to entice the person. We don't take a problem the person has and say, oh, this is why you should buy this because it solves your problem, right? Design thinking approaches it in a very different way. I'm going to get her off the screen because it kind of makes me dizzy. So it's a mindset, okay? The second thing is that design thinking, it's a method. Now, note, I didn't say process, and process and method aren't the same thing. A method is a particular way of doing something, okay? A process is a stepwise set of actions involved in completing a method. Now, this may sound like complete hyperbole to you. You might be like, what the heck is this guy rambling on about? But hopefully, some of this will stick in your minds, and you'll understand as you go forward in life that design thinking it is different, although it is not that. It's not like you don't have to be Einstein to do it. So it's a mindset, it's a method, and the method, from my perspective, involves taking the mindset and the tools that we have as designers to solve problems for people, right? And I would put people under here, but it would ruin my spacing, and the composition would be all off, and so I just couldn't have that. So mindset plus tools, solve problems for people, right? Design thinking is a mindset, a method, and then the last thing, design thinking helps us to tell stories. It helps us to be good storytellers, okay? Now this is going to sound maybe silly, but take my word for it, out in the real world, the ability to tell stories that resonate with people is key. So stories provides a way to discover and explain stories that need to be told and understood, right? That's what design thinking gives you. And it's crucial that you understand that. If you're going to build empathy for the person who's a diabetic and they want to use that thing over here on their arm, then you need to be able to tell the business wonk that doesn't get it why this is important, right? This is important to that diabetic because they could die. This is the first main thing, right? But you need to be able to build on that story and explain all the ins and outs of it if you're going to be a design thinker. It's not just a creative process, right? Just checking my notes. Okay. I really like this quote, and so I thought I'd share it with you guys. Telling stories is one of the most powerful means to influence, teach, and inspire. What makes storytelling so effective for learning? For starters, storytelling forges connections among people and between people and ideas. Stories convey the culture, history, and values that unite people. That's by Vanessa Boris from the Harvard Business Review. So you come up with an idea and you want to convince someone that this is what they should do, this is what they should build, better be ready to tell them a story that really resonates with them, right? That's why storytelling is key, and it's a component of design thinking that has to be talked about. Making any sense or like, yeah, okay. I love the feedback, thank you. And storytelling matters, it's how people relate, right? So, okay, so some of you might be asking, so you might be thinking anyway, does the process matter? Why are there so many process models if you just told us that it's not a process, it's a mindset? Well, the process models exist because they make it easier when starting out, right? So there's nothing wrong with the process models, and they make it easier to explain to people who are new to the concepts of design thinking. So it's okay to pick out the one with all the E's if that's the one that's going to resonate with the person you're trying to get bought into design thinking, right? You got to think about what's going to resonate with them. But they make it easier. So there's nothing wrong with using a process model, but understand that there's things behind it that you have to ingrain in your being, so to speak. Okay? So the design thinking mindset. So how do you get Zen? I can't cross my legs like her, but how do you get that mindset, right? There's a company called, I think it's Innovation Minds. It's down here. I've got the source link, but they have this notion of these 7 pillars that you can use as a design thinker to center your mind around in order to be really good at design thinking, right? So the first one's empathy. I mean, I've probably said the word empathy a bajillion times in this presentation already, but if you're going to truly create things that solve problems for people that they really appreciate, you have to be empathetic to what their problems are. Optimism. Might sound corny, but when you approach a problem and you're trying to figure out a solution, man, there's times when it would be easy to get real cynical and fall down a rabbit hole and be like, ugh, we can't do it. If you're going to be a design thinker, you got to be positive. It's crucial. You got to be optimistic that we can use this mindset and this method to solve this problem. Embrace ambiguity. One of the questions I ask when I interview people is I ask them, how do you deal with ambiguity? It's crucial that you don't get too nervous when approaching a new situation, that you deal with the ambiguity in an okay way, because if you can handle the ambiguity, then you're prepared to listen to what the person is going to give to you about the problem you're trying to solve. If you can't handle ambiguity, then you're not in the right mindset to really hear them and hear what their problems are. Number 4, make it. Very simple. Design thinking is about making stuff. It might be a dry erase drawing. It might be a 3D printed model. It might be something out of wood. It might be a painted picture in oils. Whatever is appropriate for your project. You're going to make things. You should make things at every step in the method. Notice I didn't say process. Every step in the method. Learn from failure. Learn to embrace failing as an opportunity to learn. Okay? And if you're handling ambiguity okay too, you're going to do really well with this one, right? Like if you can handle learning from failure, you're not afraid, right? So you're going to put stuff out there and you're going to fail, no matter how scared you are. Just like I was scared to come here and talk today. Iterate, 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 iterate. Just like we talked about on the history of design thinking, it's iterated over time to get to where it's at today. If you can remember and have your mind focused that I'm going to iterate on something numerous times, then you'll be getting yourself into a better mindset and ready to go. And the last one is creative confidence. The idea of creative confidence is that, that you believe in yourself enough that you can put these ideas out there, even if they're crazy, even if they're just, even if you think they're dumb. Like that's actually a really fun ideation technique is to once you have your problem statement, is to ask your team to create the worst possible idea to solve this. It's loads of fun because like people will come up with Rube Goldberg machines. But anyway, the point is have confidence in yourself to share those ideas. If you don't have confidence in your creative abilities, then you're not prepared to be a design thinker. Okay? So hopefully that didn't come off too corny, but I wanted to make sure I didn't stand up here and talk to you about mindset and then not give you something that you could actually put into practical purposes to put your mind into that mindset, right? So make it, creative confidence, iterate, empathy, optimism, embrace ambiguity. Oh, there's 2 twice. I'm so embarrassed. We're moving on. Real quick, that was a slide that I put in today, and before we left, my wife clogged the garbage disposal. And so she's like, can you help me? I'm like, no, I gotta go. And so I obviously was in too big a hurry. Okay, so what have we covered so far? We've talked about the history of design thinking. We've talked about that design thinking is a mindset. We talked about that design thinking is all about a method where you use the mindset and the tools to solve problems. We talked about telling stories and that being able to tell stories that resonate with people is crucial if you're going to be a design thinker. Tell stories that matter. I gave you 7 mental pillars that you can absorb and spend more time with in order to get your brains into a good space to be design thinkers. Okay. 3:44, I gotta hurry up, don't I? Okay, design thinking, the general approach. Okay, we're going to have a good one. So we're gonna step through the interaction design. Oh, yeah.
4 o'clock class.
Yeah.
So when you said about iteration on the previous slide, is that similar to like the agile methodology?
It's similar, but Agile doesn't do credit to actually solving people's problems. Agile is a method for developers. It's not a method for design thinkers. Thanks for coming, guys. So yeah, good question though. There's things that sound similar, but Agile at its core, it's really meant for developers. Okay, so empathize. How can we empathize? Well, when you empathize, you're trying to understand goals and pain points about the problem space that your person is in. I'm going to speed up here, so if I go too fast, put your hands up because I've already talked too long. You want to learn about the person's habits and motivations, right? What things are going on in their environment. You want to know the tools and methods that they use to solve problems or to do things in their environment, right? You want to get at the what, how, and why. You want to make sure that you listen. Listen, listen, listen. When you're trying to empathize with a person, you should be listening, right? So remember that. I've seen way too many people go into research sessions and they'll introduce themselves and then they'll just start firing off questions. And then the person that they're trying to learn from is just sitting there going, yes, no, no, yes, like, on and on. So listen, you've got to be prepared to listen. Make no assumptions. When you come into the empathy phase and you're doing your research, make no assumptions. Let them all go. Okay, how can you gain empathy? How can you do this research? There's lots of ways. You can Google these. You can do shadowing. You can do interviews. You can have the person that you're meeting with train you. It's called train the trainer. You can engage with people that live at the extremes of the scenario, right? If you were making something I lost my example, but like a person that needs to use it with one arm, right? Like they're not the normal user, but you need to make it so that they can use it so you can solve their problems, right? Empathy mapping exercise, we're going to kind of speed up here. You can do diary studies and photo journals. These are really intense and in-depth. They're fun to do, but you're going to get like a lot of stuff to read through and absorb. We actually did one at Walgreens with cancer patients, talking with them about the process of getting all the medications that they may have in order to basically to stay alive. And it's very, it was gut-wrenching because their diaries were talking about how the medicines made them sick, right? And how, I'm going to stop there, but you get the idea that if you're executing design thinking, that's the details you're getting, Make sense? So here's just a couple quick, here are a couple pictures quickly from when I was at Walgreens. So we actually would go into the stores a lot and interview people. Here we're interviewing a store associate on using one of the custom devices. And you can tell, if you just look at the picture and you're a design thinker, you're going, wow, here's the environment she works in. Here's all the labels on the shelves, all the products. There's photo back there. Okay, this is her environment that we have to know and understand that she's working in because that's what we're trying to fix. We're trying to make something that will work for her. Here's the papers that she printed out in order to stock these shelves because she couldn't read the font on that screen. Does that, like, that's a, that may not resonate with all of you, but if you can imagine 21,000 stores and all the other employees that are taking this device that I gave them, and they're looking at it and they go, I can't see the font, so I'm printing out all the papers. Like, that's a profound finding that, you know, you want to make sure you get. I will say, by the way, that font was too small. It wasn't my decision. I had to do it that way. Another contextual environmental thing. The line builds up quickly at Walgreens. That adds a ton of stress. If you're trying to stock the shelves, you're in a hurry, you're racing around, suddenly you hear IC3 over the intercom, and you've got to go up to the front and stop what you're doing. You know, this is the pin pad. I'm going to skip past that one. This last one is probably my favorite story. We were working with a store manager, and this is at the point of sale in his store, had these screens with, I hope you can see it, a keyboard on it. And so we were talking with him about something unrelated, and we said, why do you have physical keyboards at all of your point of sales? And he smiled, and at first he didn't want to tell us, and then we had to remind him, like, you know, you're not going to get in trouble, because they're all very scared of that like, you're going to report back to HQ, like what they said. So finally, we said, it's fine, it'll be anonymous. He said, I have those because my employees hate typing on the one on the monitor just above it. So he's investing in a physical keyboard because the piece of equipment that the company gave him wasn't really thought about his situation. You see what I'm saying? So if they had approached it from a design thinking perspective, they would have been talking to him about the situation in which he lives, what it's like to be an associate, what kind of things actually will work for you. Physical buttons will work for you when you're in a hurry. Targeting this little thing on here with your finger and you're in a hurry is massively prone for error. Are we okay on time? Just give me the hook if you need to. So we move into the define phase. Okay? So define is all about analyze and synthesize the things you learned in the empathy phase. Okay? Post-it notes are your friend. There is a joke out there about design thinkers are really just masters of moving Post-it notes around, something like that. But it's kind of true, but Post-it notes are your friend. Collaborate with your teammates on their interpretation of what they saw during your research sessions. Make sure that what you saw and what I saw, actually, we agree. If we don't agree, talk about that, because I may have misinterpreted something, right? You could create a problem statement. They should be human-centered, somewhat broad, somewhat narrow. And then, these are a few examples of synthesis in the wild. These are both from Walgreens. When you bring your data from your research together, you're looking for themes that then you can start to group things into so that then you can begin to solve problems by understanding those themes. So this is another way that you can actually convey everything you learned during the empathy stage, right? So this picture is everything that went into creating the last picture. I put them out of order, and I really struggled with the order of this, but the general idea of what you're seeing here is this is a map of the store, and so we labeled the area, and this says current processes or challenges, opportunities and successes, and then on a few of them, there's workarounds. We made this so that we could go back to leadership and say, here's what's going on in the store at each of these locations. There's multiple problems we need to fix here, and let's have a conversation about them, right? Define. I'm going to skip that one. Okay, so we've empathized. We've defined our problem. We're going to ideate. So ideate, you start thinking of solutions. It's pretty straightforward. There's many ideation techniques. You can Google it and go nuts. But you're coming up with ideas. Think divergently. Accept that there is no bad ideas. Don't be confined, right? Dumb can lead to great. Be confident. Yeah?
When you get to the stage at tax layer, what is the main hindrance in the groups that keeps them from moving forward in this area?
Time constraints, frankly. And I mean, to be clear and to be very open, we use all of these things at TaxSlayer, but we don't use them every time. There's times in the real world where you've got to just get something done because we've got a problem on the live site and we're in tax season and we got no choice. So you design team, give us your best estimate and you don't get to research it. So I'm taking you through sort of like the pristine version of it that we love to do, soup to nuts, as it were, but we don't always get to. But ideation can really be a struggle if people don't know what the problem is. That's the other one that really slows things down when you're ideating, or it just creates mass confusion because everybody's trying to solve a different problem. I've seen that unfold. Let me tell you, that's ugly because then people are like, great, we got to go back and research more. But if everybody is ideating and like, you know, you're drawing a square and I'm drawing a circle and someone's drawing a triangle, like we're not going to get anywhere, right? So be brave. I think I've said that a few times. Be brave, be confident, and challenge assumptions. This is where the disruptive aspect of design thinking comes in, because if you're doing your job as a design thinker, you're not going to accept, we can't do it that way because we've never done it that way. Okay. So quickly, ideation, this is a storyboard. You can use this to tell a story of a possible solution. Storyboards don't have to be pretty. This is a hand-drawn one. This is actually my drawing, because I'm not an artist. So this is another one that I did. All that matters when you're ideating is that you can tell the story behind it and connect that story to solving problems for people. Prototype, and the arrow that leads back to ideation, because that's typically what happens. So prototyping is low fidelity. It's based on what you've learned. Be brave and confident. Don't get trapped by perfection. Remember, it's experimental. All right? Here's a couple prototypes. So this first one was for an Apple Watch project before the Apple Watch came out. This is the Dyson Vacuum made out of cardboard. This is the first Super Soaker. All right? That thing's ugly. I wouldn't let my kid play with that. But you can tell the story of how it'll be fun for him. And of course, here's our obligatory Apple reference. This is the Apple I computer. I was afraid if I didn't have an Apple reference in this presentation that someone from Apple would come get me. Test. Test with real users, right? Test with them and don't judge or belittle what they say to you. If they say they hate it, say thank you. Thank you for tearing apart my work. Because that's what you need to hear anyway. So don't judge. Accept it and say thank you. Be prepared that your prototype might crash and burn. I've had that happen where you've got everything planned out. You've got this prototype loaded on a mobile phone. You go to start the session and it doesn't work. You're like, crap. So it happens. You try to be prepared for it, but you also accept it and be ready. If possible, record the sessions, but remember, it's not always sequential. Right, yeah. Okay, shut up about the sequential thing, right? So these happen in many different orders sometimes. Sometimes it's the ideal one left to right. You might do a few loops through prototype and ideation. Sometimes you get all the way over to test and you realize that your ideas aren't really hitting the mark, so you got to go back to ideate. Sometimes, come on, Arrow. Sometimes you get to the test phase. This is like the worst case scenario. You start testing your prototype and you realize that you have missed the mark at understanding what the problem could possibly be. That's the worst, because you've wasted a bunch of time, by the way. And then other times you're going to go from test to define, which means that you learned something new in testing with a real user that redefined your problem. Happens. You try to not let it happen, but it happens. Not always sequential. Test, create new ideas. Learn from the tests. It helps you empathize. Remember the mindset. Learn from your failures. Be optimistic. There you go. Okay. So I'll show you a couple quick ones, and then we'll be done. We're getting near the end. Thank you for staying. I'll pay you all later. Okay, so the palette iPad case that I mentioned to you earlier. How did I create that? And was I following this method, like very specifically or robotically? Okay, how did I empathize? Well, it started off This is back, keep in mind, in 2009 when the iPad was still fairly new, right? I had been at a McDonald's and I saw this poor lady taking orders here with this like really awkward machine. She's like oh, sorry. Her neck's all bent over, right? And she's got the machine kind of jammed into her hip and she's typing and I felt bad for her. It looked very uncomfortable, right? Well, then I started thinking about there's other people that probably have the same problem that want to use iPads in business situations. So I started to interview and talk to doctors. Just so happens that I also know a lot of nurses, my wife being one of them. Right? I talked to them about things they would like to do on the iPad, why it would be beneficial. I didn't just ask them if it was uncomfortable to hold. I said, what will you actually do if you're holding it? Construction sites have the same problem, and this is just the form factor that a lot of nurses were using at the time. So not always sequential. Yes, I know I'm annoying. So here it is. What did I do? I jammed empathize and define together. And I made a problem statement. How might we help people safely, securely, and efficiently use a tablet computer while moving around their work environment? Right? So then we move into Ideate. And this will speed up from here. So I did some research on what was out there in the market already. And my first prototype, I'm speeding this up, but my first prototype wasn't really a prototype, but it was more of a photoshopped iPad that was included on this first picture. See, this guy